This is the Outpost RBA podcast, where we lead security teams to higher ground and new perspectives needed to secure the frontiers of enterprise, with hosts Will Robus and Stuart McIntosh.
Hello and welcome to the Outpost RBA podcast, where we help security leaders and practitioners get to higher ground and gain new perspectives for securing the frontier of enterprise. We are your hosts. My name is Will Robus, and here with me is Stuart McIntosh. Hello, everyone, and thanks for being here today. Hey, Stuart, how are you doing?
Good, wonderful, always exciting.
It's spring. It's starting to be spring everywhere, even if it might not feel like it, but the calendar says it is. So today, go ahead. Sorry.
Less snow. That's how we measure spring up north. Less snow. Yeah.
Less snow and less days of snow. All right. Welcome, everyone. In this episode today, we are going to talk about why RBA is revolutionary. It's a term that's thrown around a bit, maybe a bit too much in the cybersecurity industry. So we are going to, at the same time, try to clear up some of the misnomers and misconceptions that we frequently run into when talking with customers and practitioners about RBA. At the end of the discussion, you'll have some very clear expectations of what RBA is and how you can start to champion it inside of your organization. God, that was terrible. I'm going to do that again. Welcome, everyone. In this episode, we will talk about why RBA is revolutionary. At the same time, we'll try to clear up some of the misnomers and misconceptions we frequently run into when working with customers and security practitioners. At the end of the discussion, you'll have some very clear expectations of what RBA is, how you can start to champion it in your organization, and show that it is truly a revolutionary approach to defensive security. But before we jump into our topic today, we wanted to mention a couple of ways you can get involved with other security professionals around the topic of threat detection and security alerting innovation. One way is to check out the RBA Community. You can get plugged in at the website rba.community. This is a very active and growing group. I think we have over 700 people now represented from all around the world. Stuart, I think we've got people from almost every continent.
Not Antarctica yet.
That's right. Yeah, nobody in the South.
And I don't think Africa yet, but all of the others, yes.
Okay, all right. So the group is a mashup of RBA enthusiasts, security practitioners in large and small companies, as well as Splunkers and Splunk partners. We host at least a couple of events every month. One of them is a meetup to help people get started with risk-based alerting. It's about an hour-long virtual meeting where we connect new people with other members of the group, listen to success stories, hear some lessons learned stories from others that have worked to deploy RBA in their companies, and get plugged into the many resources available to accelerate your RBA journey. The other event we typically run is called Office Hours. This is more of an open Q&A forum where you can bring your questions and get some guidance from some of the most seasoned experts in RBA. And yes, Stuart is one of those experts.
That one's been it's always enjoyable because it's something different each week or each event we do. And I love the back and forth on it. Like you can really tell even the participants and the questions they ask that they're definitely on the journey and looking for other people who are doing it with them.
Yeah, and it's truly a watering hole of experts. I think you like to mention usually, Stuart, that pretty much anybody who's given a .conf talk on RBA is in that group and very active in responding to people's posts and participating in these events. So it's a great way to get connected. Another way to connect is by attending Splunks.conf this year. It is in Las Vegas and starts officially on July 17th. We, of course, will be there and hosting a real-life in-person meetup around the RBA community. Then that's scheduled to happen on the first day of .conf for that Monday night, which is right before the bots capture the flag competition, which we've personally done a few times, and it's a really, really cool thing. So yeah, get there, get your registrations in for the conference, get your T&E approved by your bosses. And hopefully we will see you there Monday night, July 17th, and have a really, really great week in Vegas around .conf. So that brings us into our topic of the day. And like I mentioned before, we're trying to ask and answer the question of, why is RBA revolutionary? And it seems that lots of vendors, lots of providers, even some customers or industry experts, every year there's sort of a revolutionary tool or revolutionary approach that's going to be the next best thing.
You would think by now the problems are all solved. I mean, if you have a dozen revolutionary things every year, you would think it's the temperature of my latte is the problem of the day.
Yeah. And I think everyone's trying to get there, and everyone's trying to take care of all those problems. But as we mentioned and talked through our first episode, the reality is very complex. It has lots of layers. And so while we have lots of tools and abilities, the difficulty, at least from our perspective, is kind of bringing those all together and making them work. So which is probably a good segue into really the first key point that we want to talk about today. And that is probably the most prevailing misnomer that we run into. And that is, RBA is not a widget. When I say that, Stuart, maybe can you expand on that a little bit, based on the conversations we've had and the work we've done the last 3.5 years?
And in a concise statement, not in 2 hours of ranting.
Yes.
Okay.
A tiny soapbox is what you have for the next few minutes.
So I like widget. It's a fun word. The other word I would use is not a feature you turn on in a product. And so why I like widget, just because it's more fun to say. The one idea that we've run across is that this is something in a product that I just turn on, or I set up 3 things and then I'm good. And what that does is it really, so marketing does a wonderful way of highlighting the wins, the value of RBA. But what it really doesn't do is help pull apart or dissect how you achieve those wins. And so everyone else just thinks, oh, there's a button. Let me find that button and let me do it. And then whatever kicks out has to be wonderful. And we talked about it before, about just all the layers and all the complexity. And so I think it sets people up for an unfair expectation of effort and outcome. So the outcome set by whatever marketing or whatever they've heard. And you've heard us talk about the virtues of RBA. I mean, from us, you would think it's amazing. So there's that expectation of value, but we don't always talk about the expectation of effort or the how. And if you don't have that to kind of backstop it, you will fill it in by saying, I just have to turn it on. It's something I can just do. And you won't see that expectation of value from it. You just won't. Because this has to be reoriented in your processes, in your thinking, in what your current environment's doing. There's all of these little layers, these nuances to it, that when they're all in alignment, yes, that expectation of value is very real and becomes very tangible. But we want to use this to reset that expectation of effort or how, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so it's not something you just turn on and it lights up and it works.
There was someone I talked to at another customer on a panel, and they did that. The Splunk ES RBA out of the box, They said, yes, we want to do RBA. Let's turn it on. And they turned every detection on that had a risk, that had that adaptive risk action. They turned all of them on and said, hey, it'll find whatever's in our environment, no problem. And they turned on those risk alerting notables as well. And they had tens of millions of risk events and tens of thousands of risk notables a day. That's what happens when you treat this as a widget or an on button. And to them, it completely blew them out. Like they were like, I don't even know if this is accurate. Like it was so much information that they didn't even see any value because they didn't know what's real and what's not real. So that's what happens if you treat this potentially as a button.
Yeah. And we've seen that in other SIM go lives as well, where you just turn everything on and it creates this great flood. So then that begs the question, what is RBA?
Yeah.
We talk, I mean, the more conversations we have and the more we work with the community and the group, we've always said it's a journey, and it seems like people are starting to, absorb that and adopt it. But that's a emotional term. So from a actual technical or an architecture standpoint, what is RBA really?
What's the technical term for journey? So I think, so if we're starting to kind of re-baseline, okay, what's the expectation of effort or how, and we're talking about this journey, I think some of it is that understanding of where are you now. So the environments that we've seen, the customers we worked with, they're all in slightly different places. And so if we're going to attach to journey, we'll say they're all starting at a different point in the path. Similar, like if we were to group them, they're all way over here in the beginning, but they're all slightly different. In technical terms, some have wonderful detection sets. They're really good at it. Some of them have great SOC analysts. Some of them have great data, but don't know what to do with it. And so that figuring out where you're start, by the way, no one has all three. If you have all three, you're beyond most security products.
Sorry, all three. Can you repeat those three again?
Yeah, the three being great data and data engineers coming into your SIM, into Splunk, great detection authors, and great SOC analysts. If you have all three, and here's the kicker, they're working well across the teams, then you're down there. You're down the path. You're down the journey. Your problem set is probably different. But if you have any one of those, it slightly adjusts where we start, but it's easy to put you on the path to this value, to this success. So you have to kind of identify where you're at. And I also think the other thing is there's precursors. So similar to chemistry, there's these precursors that are necessary for a successful venture down this path. And to me, it really boils down to you have good data coming in. You have enthusiastic people who want a new way of doing detection and response. And you have some of these solid detections in the beginning. It doesn't have to be, the thing that you and I usually say is it's not exhaustive, but it's comprehensive. And I think that's a really great way of framing. That's what we need in the beginning is these precursors and this and setting an expectation of what we mean by the journey.
Yeah. And so the just completely lost. I had a great thought and I completely lost it. So you have these elements and we have all of this data. We have the data, we have the teams, we have the infrastructure with the SIM. And even if you have a really strong team in each one of those groups, we've seen them having barriers to moving forward, right? So it's a combination of the complexity that we talked about in previous episode, the constant rate of change, and all those things. So even if they're
and
strong,
how each team is measured as being successful.
yeah,
Let's not forget that, because I think in some ways they're seeding competing efforts simply by how do we measure success for this team versus that team.
yes. So what RBA really is at its foundation, and what I think makes it revolutionary in the success it delivers, is it's really a system, a new system of bringing all those pieces together along with the team to create new alignment, new inputs, new outputs, new workflows, all around this framework and the mechanics of the risk-based alerting piece.
Exactly. And I think so let's just call them 3 team roles, one being detection engineering, one being SOC or response, and one being Splunk engineers or data onboarding. RBA can help each one of them individually. Like their job can get more efficient, more standardized, easier to grow, stuff like that. When you hear us talk about these values or outcomes, it's when all 3 are using it, not when one team's using it. So like if the detection team says we love RBA, but the SOC analysts do not buy into that vision, they don't champion it, they're anecdotally accepting of it, but they're not participating. They're observers, but they're not participants. You really need all of the teams to be participants in it. And that's where you get these outcomes.
Yeah. And I think one of the images we used on a whiteboard session was you think of a tug of war where one team is pulling against the other, right? I mean, that's the goal of the game. But if you think of it as almost a 3-way tug of war, and it's not that everyone's fighting against each other, but they have sort of different incentives, different bosses a lot of times, and different measurements for success. And a lot of the times those measurements are even competing. So you think about that as a metaphor of a 3-way tug of war where everyone's maybe even just standing still, but if one person's trying to pull and move forward kind of against the flow or outcomes of everyone else with even some resistance or friction, others are going to feel that even if they're standing still. So the revolutionary thing that I think RBA does, and this is what we've seen in the organizations we've worked with, is it all of a sudden gets those 3 groups to, first of all, stop pulling against each other, but more importantly, start moving in the same direction. So if you think of those 3 people on the apex or the corner of a triangle pulling against each other, and then all of a sudden they all start pulling in one direction, well, that whatever they're pulling on, whatever that center point is going to move somewhat quickly and efficiently. I mean, so
exactly
where they're standing still versus going somewhere.
And we've called that the light bulb or the unlock, or you can see it in the people who have gone through it. There's something different in their approach or their thinking once they have that aha moment of, because I don't think most of them realize that they're set up to compete against each other within the same company. I don't think they realize that. And I don't think leaders are knowingly setting up the teams for internal competition. It's just that's the way the metrics and the incentives are kicking out. So what we're trying to do is say, listen, I get all that. I get the need to measure success and effort and improvement, because what's a leader have to do? They have to confidently tell everyone else in the business, yes, we are getting better. That money you entrust us with, we took it, we converted it into more security. That's what they have to prove.
Yeah. So that's I want to pivot, or actually I want to pack that a little bit right now. So we talked about the three groups: the engineering and data side, the threat detection, detection writing groups, and then the SOC analyst and the IR piece. So let's kind of just walk through each one briefly and talk about what we've seen as their directive and incentives, and then we'll kind of play that off of why there's friction and tension. Let's unpack that three-way tug of war, so it's hopefully a little more clear to people listening.
And I think if we were to think of this as taking raw material and refining it into something of greater value, let's walk it that way. So data being raw material, like there's data everywhere, and we want to get value out of it for security, for a security outcome. Then the first stop is these data engineers, Splunk admins. That's the first stop. They have to create a platform or manage a platform that's always up, high performance, that can absorb or ingest this data from all different means and put it in this platform in a consistent manner. A lot of people are like, well, I mean, how difficult could that be? Everything's in the cloud. Everything's right. Like, I don't understand what is difficult about that job. Well, what's difficult about that job? Think of how many times priorities change in IT. What direction are we going with IT products or services? And then think about every business priority and the fact that they change. Like in this example, a single merger and acquisition decision to buy another company. Now, all of a sudden, these poor data people have to find solutions to data and technologies they may have never seen or weren't architected well, right? So we inherit that tech debt from that company we bought, and now we're on the hook. We got to deal with it. We got to get it to the quality standards that we hold for ourselves. So they have this constant game of what's going on. And on top of that, let's say you have a feed from like Microsoft that's stable and working and great. They make changes. And because it's cloud, they make changes whenever they want. So on a Tuesday, the format of the data they were absorbing might have changed, either because of a problem or something knowingly changed. Like, yeah, we're providing these instead of XML or comma separated, it's now JSON. Well, that's a complete break to these poor data engineers. So they're struggling. And I think success to them is, are we bringing in as much data as we're allowed to bring in efficiently and of high quality? And so their job is to try to amass data. And they're not worried about downstream what this might be doing to an analyst. They're not aware of it because it's not a metric that they're measured by to show effort and to show improvement.
Yeah. And quality. So quality is it's a big challenge that they face daily. At the same time, these technologies are expensive and there's a lot of competing technologies. And I mean, we hear about POCs in a lot of different areas just from a data standpoint, a data handling, where it goes. I mean, this data is useful to other groups, not just security. So they are under probably the more budget pressure than even the other groups, since it's so infrastructure heavy and they have a lot of customers, right? Security is one of their customers. They have a lot of platforms they're managing. So it's a very broad directive they have. And also it comes with some big numbers on the budget. So they're constantly being scrutinized and asking to do more with less, do more with the same, all, quarterly.
And I think it's fair to think of them almost as an infrastructure team, meaning they know downtime impacts their customers.
Yeah.
But when we say the word quality of the data, what's interesting there is, to them, quality might mean something different than the next group, detection engineers. So to a detection engineer, data quality, the way they measure this other team as a customer, because they're a customer of what they're putting in, are the names of the fields accurate to the values they're producing? Is consistency there? Is accuracy there? Little things like this. Are the fields available that they want to use? And so that idea of quality, the leadership may not know that this is a requirement for good detection engineering. They don't know that that's a precursor to taking advantage of really smart detection engineers, is stability and quality of that data source. So it may not even hit the idea of measuring the data team by that at all. And the data team may not even know it, because detection engineers may not know how to express how they're using this data. Instead, it sounds highly critical, maybe borderline whining or complaining, because it seems nitpicky. This field's off. This field's off.
Well, and not to, and this is not a statement of that they're not intelligent or not that, I'm not trying to state they don't know what they're doing, but a lot of times they might not know how they're using the data or want to use the data, because a lot of what they do is in the kind of this iterative experimental realm. So they're,
Right.
you know, that's where you get into this quote unquote threat hunting piece, where they are literally going through this data and seeing what they can find consistently, efficiently, that would add to increasing the visibility and security for the alerting program.
And that's the second refinement of this stack of data. So the first refinement is classifying, standardizing, and putting into a platform. That's the first kind of refinement of this raw data. The second refinement would be this detection team, this threat hunting detection team. And their ability to refine this for another value, for increasing the value of it, is very much based on that quality and stability of that feed, because they're looking at things like what changed. Well, if the answer to the what changed is, I don't know, they changed the feed again, well, that completely throws off your ability to detect potentially malicious stuff, because what you're actually catching is environment changes, not malicious stuff. And now all of a sudden we have to code for it, and it gets more complicated. Or if the fields aren't good, we might be actually performing the same field extraction or transformation 2-3 times. We might be fixing the problem 2-3 times because we didn't have a conversation over here.
Yeah. So
because there's an output need.
Right. Okay. So that's the relationship between the data and the detection engineers. Now let's kind of move forward and talk about the outputs and the metrics of the detection engineers, and then how in turn that relates to the SOC.
So in their stage of leveraging or refining data for security outcomes, detection engineers tend to be measured by volume of detections created. And the reason I'm very specific in that is an easy metric for leadership to show improvement in security is look at all the things we've added to our vision of what's going on. Where this falls apart is there's maintenance in the previous set of detections, right? We have to make sure they're still doing what we asked of them, or they're still finding value, or like there's not an idea of a life cycle of a detection. There's just new being added. And so it's this constant pursuit of a growing number. We always want to see that chart go up and to the right. And the faster it goes up and to the right, the happier, like, hey, we're more secure. That tends to be the sole metric that this team's measured on. And because of that, what happens is there's this constant desire to push, put more in. But the output on a metric is a new detection, but the output in this chain of refinement is more work on the SOC analyst, on the next people in this chain of refinement. So more detections may mean typically more output to the analysts, more alerts, more logs they have to look at. Now there's more things to investigate. Things may take longer because you just added AWS detections and I have no idea how to investigate AWS. You just added it and I don't even know what to do with it. And they're like, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later. We had to get the detections in. And so there's this transfer. And then again, it might come off as critical, complaining, whining, where analysts say, please turn off that detection. It's overwhelming us. Or please tune that detection. Because the language they're using is so specific so that it can be shown or demonstrated, is that it feels like a bunch of paper cuts. And so it sets up this relationship to not be as beneficial or symbiotic, because it seems like every time we try to do right by the company and put in detections, this team comes in and critiques the work that we put in. And so it can be very easy to say it's us or them, like like you separate.
Well, and those critiques from the SOC are extremely valid, because the set of measurements that they're held to is alert handling, right? So that could be alert volume, the number of alerts that you've gone through, your mean time to resolution, all of these throughput metrics, as well as total volume. And we've even seen the total number of alerts that a SOC gets a month reflected on the SOC directly. So if alerts go up, that's bad, and it's a negative metric on the SOC, which essentially they have no control over. So they're sort of at the end, the bottom of the hill, if you will, and held accountable for all of these things that they have very little control or input over.
And I think that's two things. One, they're at the front line of true security outcomes being illustrated in an environment for a company. They are where all these investments in people and technology kind of funnel down to, is what is the quality of things that they have to work on, and how efficient are they, or what was the quality of the outcomes of those tasks they've been asked to do. It's the ultimate refinement of all things security and data, is what does their work look like, how much is there, and how high of quality is the outcome of that work. Now, what's great is the easiest place for us to explain misaligned incentives for security leaders is that exact metric. We will ask people individually, okay, how do you measure your detection engineering team? And it's always, how many new detections did we add? And let's just use a month as a unit of time. Oh, we added 10 detections this month. Now you ask the SOC leader. For some reason, security operations centers tend to be measured more as help desks and call centers, as opposed to more like a security team. And so because of that, we look at volume, alert volume, as an indication of how to reduce load. Because if we ran a call center, we want people to be able to self-service. There's no idea of this self-service in a SOC.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the only real way of pushing that number of alerts down. The easiest is to tune them out, or stop putting the thing that causes them, which are detections. And then the second thing they measure by is mean time to resolve. Okay, how quick are we doing alerts? And I hate this metric because it incentivizes whack-a-mole. It incentivizes a lack of creativity or problem solving, because the analysts, as they look at an alert, they know a clock is running, looking at their lap time around the racetrack. And so because of that, there's this natural anxiety to just want to jump to any conclusion that's the least amount of effort and the quickest way to close this, which is benign. It's
Yeah.
the fastest way to encourage benigns. And we've seen this where the tighter you scrutinize mean time to resolve, I bet I'm willing to put $10 on it that I bet the more you scrutinize that, the higher your benign rate is, because that's the behavior it's encouraging. So they are actually being held to like two competing misaligned incentives within the same group. And so this is the clearest demonstration of we have to get everyone on the same page. And we as two units, as two teams, need to present a united story to leadership. Because if we don't present a unified story about what's really going on, what's the process we've all agreed to improve security, they're going to pick us apart because they're going to think of us as individual capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of bringing that full circle and trying to close this out in a summary is the system or the team dynamic of a security program is complex in and of itself. And we spent some time today talking about how some of those incentives and motivations can work against each other as a team, not only creating friction, but also reducing efficacy of security for all the teams and the organization as a whole. So when we talk about RBA not being a widget, not being something you can turn on, while yes, it's a feature set, it has some mechanics, it has some architecture, it relies on infrastructure, it really provides a foundation to create a new systems approach that integrates these teams, aligns those incentives, puts everyone in the same. I mean, one of the most interesting pieces of feedback we've gotten from customers we've implemented in was at the end of the implementation process, at the end of the journey from zero to end-to-end functionality in RBA, was our teams are finally speaking the same language. And that's a quote I will never forget on that exit interview. And it was something we had taken for granted until then, I think, because we didn't really appreciate that part of the journey for these teams. So when we talk about being revolutionary, it's this systems perspective and alignment of these groups that really not only provides advances in all of their abilities to do their jobs, but just this revolutionary outcomes of the metrics that we see, right? But those metrics only come from those teams adopting it together, working together, believing in it, because the activities are end to end. So the good news is that, I mean, you mentioned precursors before, but most of the companies we deal with have all of the pieces of those precursors. It's a matter of kind of going down the path together. And everybody doesn't have to be all in at once, but they have to be open to exploring this and doing a little bit of work and thinking about things in a slightly different way. And it's different. It's not hard. It's just different.
You can't open a lock with a key that only has one bump. Like, you have to have everyone on it to turn the key to open the door. There's value for everyone individually, but to get to real outcomes, it's a team effort, and it's cross-team alignment and communication, supporting each other and understanding what the other ones are being asked to do.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Just to kind of round it out, RBA is a revolutionary systems approach, threat detection and incident response. Most enterprises, like we said, have the tools and data and the team members to be successful, even in a short period of time. The caveat is RBA is an exercise in complex coordination. It has a lot of layers, involves these multiple teams that we talked about, which it also comes down to a big component of it is just kind of change management, and making changes and building new systems isn't a spectator sport. We need participation from all those different groups. Our company is built on guiding and accelerating enterprises to realize and get them to the massive gains achieved by RBA implementation. But we still need the teams and the team members to be on board. And most importantly, at least one champion in that organization to say, hey, this is the way, we've seen the future. Let's figure out a way to go from where we're at now to a future that will put us in alignment and allow us to all get more done. And we've seen that at the management level. Ideally, it's at the leadership level. But the key is you have to get someone from each of those groups participating. They can be skeptical, but they at least have to be willing to kind of give it a shot. So if you want to be an RBA champion in your organization, definitely reach out to Stuart or I directly, and we give you all kinds of ammunition and anecdotal stories to help make your job as a champion easier. So please check out our website at outpost-security.com. You can sign up for the Slack group I mentioned earlier at outpost-security.com/Slack-sign up. You can hit Stuart or I up on LinkedIn. And of course, check out the RBA community at rba.community. So thanks for your great insight as always, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Outpost RBA podcast. Stuart McIntosh has over 20 years of experience building and maturing security programs inside Fortune 500 companies. In 2018, he gave a talk at Splunks.conf titled "Say Goodbye to Your Big Alert Pipeline and Say Hello to Your New Risk-Based Approach," which started the rise of RBA. As the creator and architect of risk-based alerting, he pioneers security methodologies at Outpost Security, which he co-founded with Will. Will Robus has spent the last 20 years in the operations or financial C-suites at technology and security companies, focused on what drives results and successful scaling. At Outpost Security, he works with CISOs to imagine a more expansive future for their SOC, once it has a solid RBA foundation. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share it with your security team and CISO. Connect with us on LinkedIn and contact us at outpost-security.com to lift your team out of the fog of alert confusion with RBA 0 to 1.